The night was thick with the scent of damp earth and burning herbs, the kind of oppressive dankness that clung to the skin like a second layer. Paco crouched behind the weathered wooden chest in his sister's room, his fingers trembling as he pried open the rusted lock. The metal groaned in protest, but he didn't stop, couldn't stop, not when the answer to everything might be inside. Anya had warned him 100 times, "Don't touch it, Paco, not until we're ready." But when had he ever listened? The lock gave way with a final, reluctant click. Inside, nestled between bundles of dried sambong leaves and a cracked clay jar of lana oil, was the pendant. It was smaller than he'd imagined, a tarnished silver locket, its surface etched with symbols that seemed to shift under the flickering candlelight. The weight of it in his palm sent a jolt through his arm, like static from a storm. This was it, the relic their grandmother had died protecting, the key to the secrets their order had buried. A floorboard creaked outside the door. Paco froze, his breath hitching. Anya wouldn't be back until dawn. She was at the Hagdanan, the final trial before their initiation, but the house was never truly empty. There were always whispers in the walls, shadows that moved just beyond sight. The footsteps passed. He exhaled, slipping the pendant into his pocket. Moncheng was waiting by the dried-up swimming pool of the abandoned Velasco mansion, pacing like a nervous dog. The moonlight cut through the broken tiles, casting jagged shadows across his face. "Took you long enough," he hissed. "I thought you got caught." Paco smirked, tossing the pendant in the air. "Since when do I get caught?" Moncheng flinched as if it might explode. "You shouldn't be playing with that. What if what? Paco snapped. "It's just a damn necklace. Anya acts like it's cursed, but look." He gripped it tight, turning it over. Nothing. No magic, no ghosts, just metal. Moncheng swallowed hard. Then why'd they hide it? That was the question, wasn't it? The pendant was part of their final test, a test Anya claimed would bind them to the Samahan, the secret brotherhood of albularyos their family had served for generations. But Paco didn't want spells and rituals. He wanted answers, like why their grandmother had vanished the night she became the order's leader, like why no one would speak of the bloodstains still etched into the floor of the old meeting hall. He slammed the pendant against a rock, once, twice. "Kuya!" Moncheng yelped. The third strike cracked the locket open. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then a sound, not from the pendant, but from the mansion behind them. A child's laugh, high and sweet, echoing through the empty halls. Paco's blood turned to ice. The Velascos had no children. Moncheng was already backing away, his face white. "We need to go, now!" But Paco couldn't move, because the laughter was getting closer, and the pendant, the damn pendant, was glowing. A sickly green light pulsed from its core, illuminating the symbols he couldn't read, but suddenly understood. Feast, flesh, forgotten. Then the screaming started. It wasn't from the mansion, it was from the street. They ran, the pendant burning a hole in Paco's pocket. By the time they reached the source of the noise, a crowd had already gathered. A girl, maybe 12, dressed in a lace nightgown, lay convulsing on the cobblestones. Her skin was bone white, her lips blue. Around her neck, a silver chain glinted. The same chain Paco had just stolen. "Kia!" A woman shoved through the crowd, her silk robe trailing in the mud. Doña Criselda Velasco. Her manicured hands clutched her daughter's face, but the girl's eyes were rolled back, her mouth frothing. "What did you do?" she shrieked, her gaze locking onto Paco. He didn't have an answer, because the truth was worse than she could imagine. He'd broken something, and whatever was in that pendant was now inside Gia. Moncheng grabbed his arm. "We have to get Anya." But it was too late. The first howl split the night, long, guttural, from no animal that should exist in the city. The crowd scattered. Even Doña Criselda froze, her face draining of color, because she knew. They all did. The Aswang had come to collect, and they weren't leaving without the girl. The night swallowed them whole as they fled, the taste of iron sharp on Paco's tongue. Gia's screams had faded into whimpers by the time they reached the old Hagdanan, the initiation hall hidden behind a veil of strangler figs and rotting bamboo. The door was barred from the inside. Anya would be in there, kneeling before the elders, drinking the bitter oracion tea that would open her third eye. She wouldn't come out until dawn. Paco slammed his fist against the wood. "Ate, open up!" No answer. Only the distant chanting of the albularyos inside, their voices weaving into a hum that made his teeth ache. Monching tugged at his sleeve. They won't stop the ritual, not even for— Shut up! Paco kicked the door, the impact shooting up his leg. The pendant in his pocket pulsed like a second heartbeat. He could still see Gia's face, the way her pupils had swallowed the whites of her eyes, how her fingers had twisted into claws. Something moved in the trees behind them. Not an animal, nothing that natural. The shadows between the trunks rippled, as if the darkness itself had grown muscles. Monching made a sound like a choked sob. "We need to go, now!" Paco didn't argue. They ran, not toward town, but into the sugarcane fields that bordered Batulao Mountain. The stalks whipped at their arms, leaving thin red lines that stung with sweat. Behind them, the thing in the shadows kept pace, not chasing, herding. The fields gave way to a dirt path slick with recent rain. And there, slumped against a lightning-blackened nara tree, was a figure Paco recognized. Tatay Rodel, the old Mangkukulam who sold love potions and curse breakers at the market. His straw hat was gone, his shirt torn open to reveal a chest mapped with scars, some old, some still glistening. "You're too late," he rasped. Blood flecked his lips. "They took her to the mountain." "Who?" Rodel laughed, the sound wet and broken. "The ones who've been waiting, since the first blood moon, since your Lola made her bargain." The name hit like a slap. Lola Esmeralda, the grandmother who'd vanished the night she became the Samahan's leader, the one whose body they'd never found. Monching whimpered, "What bargain?" Rodel's eyes gleamed in the dark. "To keep the Aswang fed, one child every generation, in exchange for power." He coughed, spitting crimson into the dirt. "Your sister's next, but the girl, she's just appetizer." The pendant burned against Paco's thigh. He yanked it out, the metal searing his palm. "Why does it want her?" Rodel's grin showed too many teeth. "Because it's not a thing, boy. It's a key." He reached into his own throat, into it, fingers vanishing past the knuckles, and pulled free a blackened molar strung on the wire. "Take this. Lets you see what they are." Monching gagged. Paco didn't move. Rodel sighed. "Or die here. Your choice." The howl came again, closer now. Paco grabbed the tooth. The world split. Suddenly, the trees weren't trees. They were ribs. The earth wasn't dirt. It was flesh pulsing beneath his feet. And Rodel? Rodel was empty. A puppet of skin with something else grinning behind his eyes. "Welcome," the not Rodel whispered, "to the real Batulao." Monching screamed, because the shadows weren't shadows. They were wings.
The tooth burned in Paco's grip, its jagged edges biting into his palm as the world peeled back like rotting skin. What had been trees now arched above them like the ribs of some long-dead beast, glistening with a film of putrid moisture that dripped into their faces. The ground beneath their feet pulsed, a slow, rhythmic shudder that made Paco's stomach lurch. He could feel it now, the truth humming beneath every surface. Batulao was alive, and it was hungry. Monching retched beside him, his hands scrabbling at his own arms as if he could claw away the vision. "Make it stop! Make it stop!" But Rodo, or the thing wearing Rodel's face, just grinned wider, his jaw unhinging like a snake's. Too late for that, boy. Once you see, you can't unsee. His tongue flicked out, too long, too pointed. Now run, unless you want to be the first course. A guttural shriek tore through the air, closer than before. Paco didn't wait. He grabbed Monching's collar and dragged him forward, their feet sinking into the fleshy earth as they stumbled toward the mountain's gaping maw. The pendant throbbed against his chest, its heat seeping through fabric to brand his skin. He could hear Gia's voice in the echoes of his skull, a threadbare whisper. "They're making me pretty for the feast." The path twisted upward, the air thickening with the stench of spoiled meat and cloying sweetness. Then, light. Not the cool glow of moon or stars, but the wavering orange of torches, their flames licking at the edges of a clearing. Paco shoved Munching behind a tumorous growth of what might have once been a boulder, his breath sawing in his lungs. The clearing was crowded. Figures draped in rotting finery swayed to the drone of bone flutes, their masks leering, boar and bat and bloated grinning moon. At the center, a table groaned under the weight of platters piled high with glistening meat, the cuts too raw, too wrong in shape. And there, atop a dais woven from sinew and bone, sat Gia. She was dressed in the gown of sewn-together skins, her hair braided with blackened fingernails. Her eyes were no longer human. "No," Monching whimpered, but Paco's grip tightened on the tooth, the illusion shredded further. The guests weren't wearing masks. The boar's snout was a snout. The bat's wings twitched with life. And Gia? Gia was smiling. A hand clamped over Paco's mouth. He nearly screamed before he recognized the scent of Luyang Dilao and burnt sage. Anya. Her face was gaunt, her initiation robe streaked with mud and something darker. She didn't speak, just pressed a finger to her lips and nodded toward the far edge of the clearing. A cage hung there, suspended from the ribcage arches. Inside, a figure writhed. Doña Cristelda. Her silk robe was in tatters, her manicured nails broken to the quick as she clawed at the bars. But it was her eyes that made Paco's blood freeze. Wide, white, unseeing. Like something had scooped out the mind behind them. Anya's lips brushed his ear. "They're not just feeding, they're choosing." Her voice was raw, as if she'd been screaming. "The girl's the vessel, but the mother..." A drumbeat thundered. The crowd parted. The Aswang lord stepped forward. He wore the skin of a man, tall, broad-shouldered, his suit stitched from the hides of black dogs. But his shadow had teeth. Gia rose, her movements too fluid, too graceful. The Lord cupped her chin, his thumb smearing something thick and dark across her lips. "Tonight," he purred, "we wake the old blood." The clearing erupted in howls. Anya's nails dug into Paco's arm. "We need the pendant now!" But Paco couldn't move, because Gia was looking straight at him, through him, and her smile stretched wider. "Paco, you're just in time for dinner." And the first platter was unveiled, and Doña Cristelda began to scream. The scream tore through the night like a blade, raw and jagged, and for a heartbeat, Paco forgot how to breathe. The platter before Gia held no roasted pig or glistening fruit, only a single, trembling heart, still pumping black ichor onto the silver. Doña Cristelda's cries turned wet, gurgling, as if something inside her throat had come undone. Anya's grip on Paco's arm was the only thing anchoring him to the earth. "Don't look," she hissed, but it was too late. The Aswang lord lifted the heart with reverent fingers, offering it to Gia.
The girl's mouth unhinged, rows of needle teeth unfolding like a grotesque flower as she leaned forward. Manching moved first. A strangled sob burst from his lips as he stumbled back, his foot snapping a twig. The sound was tiny, lost beneath the drum beats and howls, but Gia's head jerked up. Her nostrils flared. "Meat," she whispered. The clearing went silent. Paco didn't think. He lunged into Manching into the undergrowth as a dozen masked faces turned toward the noise. The fleshy ground swallowed their impact, pulsing beneath them like a tongue. Somewhere above, Anya cursed, her robes rustling as she pressed flat against the tumorous boulder. For 3 heartbeats, nothing moved. Then the Aswang lord laughed. "Little mice," he crooned, stroking Gia's hair as her body trembled with hunger. His shadow stretched, elongating across the clearing until its maw hovered over their hiding spot. Saliva dripped from its jaws, sizzling where it struck the earth. Anya's hand found Paco's, her fingers icy. "Run!" her touch screamed, but the shadows were already moving. Manching broke first. With a whimper, he scrambled backward, then turned and ran, crashing through the underbrush like a spooked deer. The Aswang shrieked in delight, half the crowd giving chase, their true forms flickering beneath the human skins. "Idiot!" Anya snarled, dragging Paco up. "We have to go now." A figure stepped into their path. Tatai Rodel, or what was left of him. His chest cavity gaped open, ribs peeled apart like a grotesque flower. But he was smiling. "Leaving so soon?" he rasped. Behind him, the trees bent, their branches knitting into a cage. Anya spat a word in the old tongue. The pendant around Paco's neck burned, its heat searing through fabric to brand his skin. Rodel hissed, clutching his hollow chest as smoke curled from his fingertips. "Lola's blood! You brought her blood!" Paco didn't wait. He grabbed Anya's wrist and ran, the forest howling at their backs. Branches lashed at their faces, the path twisting in on itself like a gutted snake. Somewhere above, Manching screamed, then the sound cut off with a wet snap. Anya faltered. "Manching! Keep moving!" Paco hauled her forward, his lungs burning. The pendant thrummed against his chest, its pulse syncing with the mountain's unnatural heartbeat. Thud, thud, thud. A shadow detached itself from the trees. Ahead, Manching stood, swaying. His shirt was torn open, his stomach a gaping ruin. But his smile was all wrong. Too wide, too many teeth.
The thing that had been Manching lurched forward, its limbs cracking and elongating like overstretched sinew. Its jaw unhinged with a wet pop, revealing a second mouth inside the first, a writhing nest of tongues and needle teeth. Paco stumbled back, his heel catching on a gnarled root as the forest itself seemed to recoil from the abomination. Anya was faster. She shoved Paco aside and hurled a handful of crushed Luyang Dilols into the creature's face. The yellow powder ignited midair, bursting into acrid flames that seared the thing's flesh black. It howled, a sound like grinding bones, and for a heartbeat, Manching's true face surfaced beneath the corruption, eyes wide with terror, lips moving in a silent plea. "Kill me!" Then the darkness swallowed him whole. Paco didn't have time to grieve. Anya dragged him into a narrow crevice between 2 boulders, slick with something that smelled like old blood. The thing that had been Manching thrashed behind them, its cries growing fainter as they crawled deeper into the mountain's gullet. The air grew thick, suffocating, the walls pressing in like the ribs of some great beast. Anya's breath came in ragged gasps, her initiation robes torn and streaked with filth. She fumbled in her pouch and pulled out a small, milky pearl, the mutya their grandmother had left her. It pulsed faintly in her palm, casting ghostly light over her hollow cheeks. "We need to bind it," before they find us." Paco's stomach churned. "Bind what?" Anya didn't answer. Instead, she drew a balasang from her belt and slit her palm open. Blood welled, black in the mutya's glow, and as the first drops hit the pearl surface, the mountains shuddered. The visions came like a flood. Paco saw their grandmother, Lola Esmeralda, standing in this very cavern, her own blood dripping onto the same pearl. He saw the pact she'd made, the terrible bargain, her life for the power to hold the Aswang at bay. And he saw the price. The mutya didn't just repel monsters, it ate memories. Anya's voice was distant, echoing. "It needs a sacrifice, something precious." Paco grabbed her wrist. "No, there's another way." "There isn't." Her eyes were glassy, the mutya's light reflecting in her pupils like twin moons. "I can feel it, Paco. It wants her." "Who?" But he already knew. The mutya flared, its light swallowing Anya whole. For a heartbeat, she glowed like a saint in a church painting. Then she screamed. Paco lunged for her, but the force of the mutya's power threw him back. His skull cracked against stone, stars exploding behind his eyelids. When his vision cleared, Anya was crouched beside him, her face eerily calm. Who are you?" she whispered. The pendant around Paco's neck turned to ice. Because she wasn't looking at him. She was looking through him. And in her eyes, he saw nothing. Nothing at all. Paco's hand shook as he gripped Anya's shoulders, her vacant stare cutting deeper than any blade. The mutya's glow still pulsed in her palm, its milky surface now streaked with crimson veins that throbbed in time with the mountain's heartbeat. "Anya!" he choked out, shaking her. "Look at me. It's me, Paco, your brother." She blinked slowly, as if surfacing from a dream. "Brother?" The word sounded foreign on her tongue. Then her gaze dropped to the pendant around his neck, and something flickered in her eyes. Not recognition, but hunger. "That belongs to her." A shriek echoed through the cavern, closer now. The thing that had been Mongching was still hunting them, its footsteps squelching in the damp earth. Paco didn't have time to unravel the horror of what the mutya had taken. He grabbed Anya's wrist and pulled her deeper into the mountain's throat, the walls narrowing until they were forced to crawl on hands and knees through tunnels that smelled of rotting meat and wet iron. The pendant burned against his chest, its heat growing with every step. The tunnel spat them out onto a precipice, overlooking a chasm so deep the bottom vanished into swirling mist. Spanning the abyss was a bridge, if it could be called that. It was made of bones. Femurs lashed together with sinew, skulls grinning from the railings, finger bones clicking in an unfelt wind. And beneath it, shadows moved. Not just darkness, but something alive, something waiting. Anya made a small, broken sound. "We have to cross." Paco's mouth went dry. "It's a trap." "All paths here are traps." Her voice was distant, but her grip on the mutya tightened. "The bridge tests you. It remembers." The first bone groaned under Paco's weight as he stepped onto the bridge. The moment his foot touched the second rib, whispers erupted from the chasm below. Voices he knew. "Weak," hissed his father's ghost. "You were always the weak one." "Paco," Lola Esmeralda's voice sighed. "You should have left the pendant buried." Anya walked like a sleepwalker, her bare feet finding purchase on vertebrae and shattered pelvises. Halfway across, the bridge moved. A femur snapped upward, nearly impaling Paco through the gut. He twisted aside just in time, but the impact sent the pendant swinging free from his shirt. It glowed like a dying star. The chasm roared. Shadows surged upward, forming grasping hands, screaming mouths. The bones beneath them trembled, threatening to shake them loose into the abyss. Anya turned. For a heartbeat, recognition flashed in her eyes.
not of Paco, but of the pendant. "She's coming," she whispered. Then the bridge collapsed. They fell. Not into darkness, but into memory. Paco saw Lola Esmeralda standing on this very bridge, decades past, the same pendant in her hand, saw her cut it loose, let it tumble into the void, saw the Aswang lord catch it with a laugh. "A trade," he'd purred, "your life for theirs." The vision shattered. Paco hit solid ground, the impact driving the air from his lungs. Anya lay beside him, the mutia's light guttering like a candle in a storm. Above them, silhouetted against the cavern's phosphorescent fungi, stood Gia. No longer a girl, no longer human. Her teeth gleamed in the dark. "You," she sighed, "are late for dinner." The scent of jasmine and rotting meat wrapped around Paco as he scrambled backward, his fingers sinking into warm, pulsing moss. Gia stood motionless, her bare feet floating just above the ground, the tattered remains of her lace nightgown now fused to her skin like a second layer. The pendant's glow reflected in her black eyes, not the glossy dark of pupils, but the absolute void of something that had never been human. Anya groaned beside him, the mutia's light flickering weakly in her palm. Her lips moved soundlessly, forming words Paco couldn't hear. Gia tilted her head, the movement too sharp, too avian. "She's forgetting faster now," she mused, stepping closer. The ground hissed where her toes touched, tendrils of smoke curling upward. The mutia always takes the sweetest memories first, the ones that smell like sunlight. Paco's hand found the hilt of his bolo knife. "What did you do to her?" "What your grandmother allowed." Gia's smile split her face like a wound. Behind her, the shadows thickened, forming shapes. A dozen figures kneeling in worship, their spines bent backward at impossible angles. At their center loomed a crude altar of blackened bone, upon which lay a twisted rosary. Not wood or ivory, finger bones. Human. Paco's stomach lurched. The pendant around his neck flared hot enough to blister skin, its chain biting into his flesh. Gia sighed in pleasure at his pain. "Lola Esmeralda tried to break the cycle," she whispered, stroking the air where Anya's cheek trembled. Her nail, black and hooked, traced Anya's jawline without touching. "Your sister smells like her, like sacrifice." Anya's breath hitched. Her eyes cleared for one terrifying second, locking onto Paco's. "The rosary?" she choked out. "It's not a weapon. It's a chain." Gia backhanded her. The crack echoed like gunshot. Anya crumpled, the mutias rolling from her grip toward the altar. Gia moved to follow. Paco's knife found her throat. Or should have. The blade passed through her like mist, lodging in the shoulder of a kneeling worshiper instead. The figure didn't scream, didn't bleed, just turned its faceless head toward him and laughed. Gia's fingers closed around Paco's wrist, her touch burning through flesh to scrape bone. "Stupid boy," she crooned. "You can't kill what's already dead." The rosary on the altar began to rattle. Bone clattered against bone, building to a crescendo that shook the cavern. The worshippers' mouths unhinged in unison, their hollow screams harmonizing with the dreadful music. And from the shadows behind the altar, a shape emerged. Tall, gaunt, wearing Lola Esmeralda's face. Her hollow eyes found Paco's. Her lips parted. The first word out of her mouth was his name. The second was run. Then the rosary screamed and the world came apart at the seams. The scream wasn't sound, it was pressure. A force like a tidal wave crushing Paco's ribs, flooding his mouth with the taste of copper and spoiled honey. He hit the ground hard, his vision splintering into fractured images. Anya convulsing as the Mutia rolled toward the altar, its light guttering like a dying heartbeat. Gia's form unraveling at the edges, her limbs elongating into something spider-like, her mouth splitting vertically. And Lola Esmeralda? It couldn't be her. It couldn't. Standing motionless as the black rosary levitated before her, its finger bones flexing like living things. Paco's pendant burned. The pain was unbearable now, the metal searing through his shirt to fuse with his flesh. He gagged, clawing at it, but his fingers slipped through as if it were smoke. Gia's laugh echoed inside his skull. It's too late. She's waking. The rosary's central bead, a yellowed molar Paco recognized with sick certainty as his grandmother's, began to pulse. With each throb, the cavern breathed, its walls contracting like a great lung. The kneeling worshippers tore at their own faces, their skin sloughing off to reveal glistening muscle beneath. Anya's hand found Paco's ankle. Her grip was weak, her fingers trembling. The pendant, she rasped, blood bubbling at her lips. It's not a key, it's a cage. Then, Lola Esmeralda moved, not toward them, toward Gia. Her skeletal hands closed around the girl's throat. Gia's monstrous form writhed, her needle teeth gnashing, but Lola didn't flinch. You took my body, Lola whispered, her voice layered with something deeper, older. But you forgot my bones. She pulled. Gia's skin split down the middle like rotten fruit. Inside, Paco retched. Inside wasn't blood or organs, but roots, black, fibrous tendrils that pulsed with the same rhythm as the mountain. They thrashed as Lola yanked them free, her hands blistering where they touched. The pendant around Paco's neck shrieked, the sound vibrating his teeth. He felt it then. The truth. It wasn't metal. It was bone. A fragment of the first Aswang spine, passed down through generations of their family, a relic not of protection, but of containment. Gia's body collapsed, hollow as a discarded snakeskin. The roots withered, curling in on themselves as Lola turned toward Paco. Her eyes were empty sockets, but her voice was horribly alive. Break it, she commanded, before she... The rosary exploded. Shards of bone became projectiles, embedding in Paco's arms, his chest. One grazed his cheek, and suddenly he remembered. A child's laughter, a knife in the dark, a bargain sealed with the grandmother's scream. The visions vanished as a force lifted him off his feet, slamming him into the altar. The pendant's chain snapped, the bone fragment clattering onto the blackened stone. Above him, the roots were reforming, twisting, taking shape. The Aswang Lord's true form emerged from the wreckage of Gia's body, her limbs too long, her mouth a gaping maw lined with rows of teeth. She inhaled, and the cavern's air rushed into her, carrying with it the Mutia's dying light. Anya's scream was the last thing Paco heard before the world went black. "Swallow it!" Then, silence, and the taste of grave dirt on his tongue. The darkness tasted like wet soil and spoiled milk, thick enough to choke on. Paco's fingers clawed at the earth, his nails splitting as he dragged himself forward. Somewhere in the void, Anya's voice echoed, not from outside, but inside his skull, a fading whisper tangled with the roots of his teeth. "Swallow it!" His tongue found the pendant first. The bone fragment had shattered against the altar, leaving only a sliver, sharp as a razor, lodged between his molars. The moment his saliva touched it, Fire raced down his throat, branching through his veins like lightning. His back arched, tendons standing taut as wires as the visions came. Lola Esmeralda, young and trembling, burying the pendant in a cedar box. The Aswang lord, then still wearing a man's face, pressing a knife to her granddaughter's throat. The bargain. One of your blood must carry me, or I take them all. The memory snapped like a rotten rope. Paco gasped, rolling onto his side just as the cavern's ceiling split open. Not rock giving way, flesh. The mountain peeled apart like a gutted fish, revealing the night sky above. The moon was red. Not the dull copper of eclipse, but the livid crimson of a fresh wound, its light painting the ruins of the altar in gory detail. The Aswang lord stood at its center, her true form fully unfurled at last, a grotesque fusion of woman and centipede, her segmented body rising 10 feet tall, her countless legs clicking against stone. Where her face should have been, there was only a circular maw lined with rotating teeth. She inhaled, and the air itself screamed. Paco's bones vibrated with the sound. Blood trickled from his nose, his ears, the corners of his eyes. He tried to stand, but his limbs were leaden, his muscles unraveling. Then, a hand gripped his shoulder. Anya. Her eyes were clear now, the Muchia's curse burned out of her. In her free hand, she clutched the black rosary, its remaining beads strung on a length of her own hair. "Get up," she snarled, hauling him upright. "We finish this now." The Aswang lord lunged. Anya moved faster. She whipped the rosary like a lash, the bones whistling through the air before wrapping around the creature's throat. Where they touched, smoke erupted, the stench of burning chitin filling the cavern. The Aswang shrieked, her many legs flailing. Paco didn't hesitate. He bit down. The bone shard in his mouth dissolved, flooding his tongue with the taste of grave dirt and betrayal. Power surged through him. Not the clean heat of the mucha, but something older, hungrier. The pendant's final secret. It wasn't just a cage, it was a weapon. His next breath came out as a roar, and the blood moon's light bent toward him, coalescing into a blade of solidified rage. The Aswang lord recoiled, her maw distending in what might have been fear. Paco swung. The light blade sheared through her midsection, ichor spraying in a steaming arc. The Aswang shrieked hit a frequency that shattered stone, the cavern collapsing around them as her body convulsed, segments rupturing like overripe fruit. Anya grabbed Paco's arm. "Run!" They barely made it to the tunnel before the mountain came down behind them, the roar of collapsing earth drowning out the Aswang lord's dying wails. They ran until their lungs burned, until the only light was the fading glow of the cursed moon. When they finally stumbled out into the open air, dawn was breaking. Batulaw's mountain was gone. In its place, a crater smoked, its edges blackened as if by fire. Anya sagged against him, her breath ragged. "It's over." Paco spat blood onto the grass. The taste of bone lingered. Somewhere in the trees, something laughed. The morning sun should have felt warm. It didn't. Paco stood at the edge of the smoking crater where Batulaw Mountain had been, his skin prickling under the pale gold light. His mouth still tasted of grave dirt and iron, the ghost of the bone shard lingering on his tongue. Beside him, Anya swayed on her feet, her fingers clutching the remnants of the black rosary like a lifeline. The mutya was gone, crumbled to dust somewhere in the collapse, but its absence left a hollow space behind her eyes. "They'll come back," she murmured. Not a question, a fact. Paco didn't answer. He didn't need to. The forest around them was too quiet, the bird song absent, the air thick with the sense of wet ash. The kind of silence that came before a storm. A twig snapped behind them. They turned as one, fists clenched,
bodies tense for a fight they weren't sure they could win. But it wasn't an Aswang that emerged from the trees. It was Gia, or what was left of her. Her lace nightgown hung in tatters, her bare feet blackened with dirt and old blood. Her eyes, once human, now reflected the light like a cat's. Pupils slit vertical, irises the color of tarnished silver. She smiled, and her teeth were too white, too sharp. "You didn't think it would be that easy, did you?" Her voice was wrong, layered, as if something else spoke through her. Anya stepped forward, the rosary beads clenched in her fist. "What are you?" Gia tilted her head, considering. A reminder. She held out her hand, palm up. On it rested a single, blackened fingernail, the last bead of the ruined rosary. The pact isn't broken, just delayed. Paco's stomach turned. "We killed it. We saw it die." "You killed one," Gia's smile widened, "but blood remembers, and mountains don't stay dead." She turned then, walking back into the trees without another word. The shadows swallowed her whole, leaving only the fingernail behind, glinting like a shard of obsidian in the dirt. Anya made a sound low in her throat, something between a sob and a curse. "We have to tell the Samahan. They need to know." "No." Paco bent, picking up the fingernail. It burns against his skin, but he didn't drop it. They knew. Lola knew. This was never about stopping them. It was about buying time. The wind shifted, carrying with it the faintest echo of laughter, not from the trees, but from the crater at their backs. Anya shuddered. "Then what do we do?" Paco looked down at his bleeding hand, at the black stain already spreading up his wrists like ink and water. "We get ready." Above them, the sun climbed higher, its light doing nothing to chase away the chill. Somewhere, deep beneath their feet, the mountain breathed and waited.